Good evening. Welcome to Maura's Epic 10-Minute Variety Show. I'm Maura, and I'm really happy to be here tonight and see you all. I always begin with a little fashion show, and if you remember, if you watched a week or so ago, my daughter-in-law Renata met me outside. She surprised me with a suitcase full of clothes because she felt I was going to need them for this show. And so little by little, I've been unveiling the beautiful clothes that she brought that day. And I always have the disclaimer is she's this beautiful Brazilian young woman, and I am this tall, kind of lanky Yankee. That's me. But somehow they kind of fit. So I want you to appreciate this jumpsuit I'm wearing. It's really kind of retro. I feel in my element in this thing. So let's see if I walk around a little bit. This camera that I use to film this or project it or whatever it is we're doing, sometimes we'll get down to the bottom. But anyway, it's a little short for me because I'm tall, but it's so comfortable. There's a couple of things that she brought me that I don't think she's ever getting back, and this is one of them. So, there is one more thing. Hold on. I've decided it's not really a good idea for me to change clothes on this show because every time I've done it, I've had a disaster. I don't even know how they let me on Facebook. But there is one other little fashion portion. You might notice my lipstick because it's so pretty. I have 3 of these. Right before I came on the air, I'm on the air, I got this little box in the mail, and inside were these 3 lipsticks. And I did order them, so it wasn't a complete shock, but I didn't really know what to expect because, glasses, because if you order things online, you're looking at the color, but this is the kind of lipstick. Okay, this one's kind of orange, right? Here it is. This is the one I have on. And it took me ages to get this on. And I'll explain why in a minute, but let's look at all the colors. Okay, that one was orange. This one is so pink. I know you, you can see, it's pink. It's kind of pink, but it's kind of plum. Because I think the other one is, no, this is pink. This is that pink. I almost wore this one, but I thought, well, I won't really go with this outfit. And I am trying to be fashionable. So these are lipsticks, but this is the kind of lipsticks they are, which is, I haven't worn this kind of lipstick. This is kind of a nostalgia, retro kind of 10-minute show. Back in the day, and when I say the day, I really mean the 70s, because I'm a 70s girl, lipsticks were a little treacherous. They went on, but they didn't do so well on the dance floor. Men got lipstick on their collars. If you ate or mussed or anything, the lipstick would kind of spread around, kind of like that stain in that Dr. Seuss book, The Cat in the Hat, or The Cat in the Hat Came Back, whichever one it was, with thing one, remember that stain? Lipsticks used to do that. And this one does too. I don't know how many little, I don't know if you can tell, but like I put it on, I'm like, wow, I look great. And then I started putting on my false eyelashes. Believe it or not, I have them. You should have seen me getting, it's a disaster in the bathroom whenever I try to do anything because the glue gets stuck to my fingers. These are pretty nice ones. They're really wispy. But back to the lipstick. So I'm messing around, of course, with my eyes. And the lipstick is all over my face. I'm like, oh, it's that kind of lipstick. And I don't think you can have this. Is this a great color? Let's be real. It's a great color. So that's my fashion show for you tonight. Lipstick, I love lipstick, and my jumpsuit. But I do want to talk about something serious because when I was trying to think about what I might do for the variety show portion tonight, I was trying to find something I could perform or read. I was kind of really coming up empty. And so I thought, well, I'll go into my archives because of course I'm a writer. And I don't like to read my writing generally, even though I keep doing it. It's because it's there, because I don't want to bore you. And I don't know if it's really interesting, but since that's what we are going to do, I want to tell you about something. I live in South Florida, and I took a little video right before I came on the air, which is what we're doing here, we're on the air, of my view. And it isn't because I think I'm so great or we're so great. I'm going to show it to you though. Okay, so this is just a little movie of what it looks like outside my door. Can you see all that? I just kind of walked around. And so we live on a river, which is great. But the problem with living on the water is that your walls are mostly glass, except for the part you need to hold the glass up because you want to look at this. And what that means, oh, it wasn't done, in South Florida is you don't have bookcases, and I'm really not kidding. So when we moved here from Vermont, millions of books, most of them are in storage. So I was looking for some books by Stefan Zweig, who is the person I want to tell you a little bit about. And you may think you don't know who he is, but I suspect a lot of you actually do. He was the most published author in the world during his lifetime. He died in 1942. He died in Brazil, which is another reason why this jumpsuit is so important, because it's Brazilian. And he was in Brazil because he was self-exiled with his wife, Charlotte, during World War II. He was Jewish. His books were banned, of course, and burned. And he was one of the most, if not the most, in my opinion, emblematic citizens, intellectuals, writers, and humanitarians of the 20th century. And I first got to know him by reading a couple of biographies that he wrote, one about Marie Antoinette and one about Mary Queen of Scots. And I read them years apart, so I didn't even know they were written necessarily by the same person and not necessarily by him even, until I picked up a book of his at a yard sale called The World of Yesterday. And he describes Europe from the turn of the 20th century until 1942. In fact, this book was sent to his publisher from Brazil the day before he and his wife committed suicide together. He had lived through now two world wars, one still in progress, and had to reinvent himself yet again. And he couldn't do it. I went to a lecture by Elie Wiesel, the Nobel Prize-winning author in Burlington, Vermont at UVM. And I got to talk to him afterwards. It's the kind of guy he was. And he said, I don't know if he said this to me or if he said it during his talk, but he said it was the writers who all committed suicide. They had no words for what had happened. And that was the fate of Stefan Zweig. But nevertheless, back to his writing, he wrote, among many, many other things, a novella called Letter from an Unknown Woman, which was made into a Hollywood film. And that is probably one of his stories that he's best known for. But he also wrote plays and poetry, and he translated all the great authors of German speaking and in French and German for us. He wrote a book called, his only full-length novel actually, Beware of Pity. And it struck me recently, if any of you have watched this miniseries called Unorthodox, about a Hasidic girl, young woman, young wife, who sort of escapes Brooklyn and goes to Germany. It's sort of all the rage. It's kind of the antithesis of The Tiger King. Unorthodox. If you haven't seen it, please do. And the young actress who plays the main character is Israeli, and she's in her early 20s, and she was interviewed, I think, in the New York Times, and the book she just read was Beware of Pity, so that gives me hope, because Stefan Zweig went from being the most translated, most widely read author of his generation to being obscure, and I hope that that's changing. So back to me. I wrote a play about him when I was in graduate school for playwriting, and it was my thesis play. I wanted to write something kind of meaty, and I was fascinated, in love with Stefan Zweig. And here's what I did. I'm just going to tell you this, even if it's boring. The characters in his play, in this play that I wrote about him, are all characters from stories he wrote. So those plots come into this play. The name of the play actually is, and I mentioned before, the novella he wrote that was made into a movie was called Letter from an Unknown Woman. And the title of the play is Letter from Eva Braun. And I didn't know until I wrote this play that you pronounce Eva Braun's name Braun, not Braun. In German, it would be Braun. So Eva Braun is a character in my play, even though he never wrote about her. However, he and his wife did commit suicide in 1942, a few years before Adolf Hitler and Eva. I thought it was a really ironic parallel there. So the thing about Stefan Zweig that makes me love him so much is how much he loved other writers and artists and how much he supported them. And I don't know now with young folks, and I hate to be generational here, but if you idolize, somebody's texting me, your writers the way we did, I mean, when I was younger, they were really our rock stars. And then we had the Beatles and all that, but we also had Hemingway and Fitzgerald, and that is a condition that I think went back a very long time, and certainly very European, and maybe continues to be. So I just want to read you something that I wrote. It's Stefan Zweig. His character is telling this in the play. And even though this more or less did happen, these are my words, but they really came from stories he told. And this gives you a sense of, I think, who he was, I hope, and why I love him so much. And this is a speech that he gives. And he says, I began collecting autographs when I was in gymnasium. All of us did it. We hounded actors, singers, poets. The mere signatures meant nothing to me. What I craved, what I treasured most, was the physical manifestation of the first blush of inspiration, a sketch, a fragment of a line, the first moment of transition out of what emerges, the mystery. That is inspiration. And I agree with Goethe when he says that to understand an artist, one must pursue him through his entire creative process, as if one could understand Goethe. And as time and opportunity conspire together, I acquired one of Beethoven's first sketches, and this is all true, his wild hand, the whole fury of his genius compressed into a few lines, a dissertation by Freud, they were great friends, a fragment of an aria by Mozart, the missing piece to a manuscript that for 150 years was awaiting its return. He found this and he returned it. I'm going to interject here because he's just the greatest guy. But none of these treasures could compare to the jewel I was to discover in Berlin many years ago. I rented a modest apartment, and above me was an equally modest apartment rented by a spinster who gave music lessons. She knocked on my door one day to apologize for the distraction she feared her students must cause me, and I assured her that any music, well, almost any music, is better than none. She relaxed well enough so that I inquired about the health of her elderly mother, who I knew lived with her. And then was the moment of my greatest earthly discovery. Her mother was none other than the daughter of Goethe's physician. Goethe, the immortal master, had been present at her christening, had looked upon her, and she upon him for the first 15 years of her life. I felt my knees buckle, and only by great concentration did I avoid fainting in her arms. And I asked, no, I begged, if I might be introduced properly, for I had only nodded to her on the few occasions that she had taken a little morning sun. And my benefactress took me upstairs, where we discovered this frail, earthly creature wearing a white cap over her thin hair. And I stood for the first time in my life in the presence of someone whose eyes reflected the light that still shines whenever Goethe's name or words are uttered. She took me into a small room and showed me a pair of candlesticks he had owned and a quill pen resting in a glass globe. This she took out, and with the greatest of respect I held it. And in a moment of wild enthusiasm, perhaps her last while she lived, she gave me that pen. And though I protested, she knew no museum could be trusted to keep it safer. I know that I am now the last person who can say that they knew someone on whose head Goethe's hand had rested. And I must report that that quill pen and all of the things, all the treasures that Stefan Zweig accumulated in his lifetime were lost when he left Europe and went to Brazil to live for the last few years of his life. So I hope you stayed with me on this. I hope you might consider looking him up. There is a movie based on another movie based on one of his stories, and I am trying to remember. It's by Wes Anderson. The Budapest, something about the Budapest Hotel. I'm forgetting the title. I meant to look it up and I forgot. It doesn't really matter because what's great is him. And the reason I think that I remembered him when I picked up that World of Yesterday for the first time, that is a book you must read, and saw some of his credits. It would be impossible to get them all into the back cover of a book. It's just so expensive. And I saw that he had written those biographies. I remembered reading them because he wrote about Marie Antoinette and Mary Queen of Scots like he knew them, like he loved them. And that kind of writing, I don't know. I won't say nobody writes like that anymore, but it's in the third person, yet he has a stake in it. And so then I had a stake in it. So I'm going to say goodnight to you, and I'll say goodnight to Stefan Zweig, which I do many nights actually, and thank him for all the joy he's brought to me and for being the inspiration for this play that I wrote. And it's never been on stage. Nothing in it has ever even been read aloud. That is the first time I've even heard that myself. And so it was a great pleasure for me. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'll see you soon. God bless. Good night. Oh, not supposed to kiss because you know what happens with this lipstick.